Hello, this is Dr. Paul Cottrell, and I'm going to be going over some of the news on Russia and a little bit on Israel. The last video I did was a little bit on New York and what was going on with Ukraine, with the funding and a little bit of the retreat that's going on. So please see that video. Now, this one is going to be much more involved on the Russian activity that's been going on in the news the last couple days or so. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the supplements that I offer, the ebooks that I offer, the anti-aging boxes that I offer. But I have produced lectures on pulmonology, all right? And for $50, you can get access to these lectures. There's 22 lectures. I have 22 PDFs that you can download. And each section, each lecture will have a video that you can watch. All right. You can watch the video multiple times. You can download the PDF. When you purchase the module for $50, you'll have access. Each day I upload a new lecture. So I have 11 lectures up there right now. There'll be a total of 22. And then once all the lectures are released, then I will release a new module. All right. But the pulmonology modules for $50, you have 22 lectures, 22 PDF files, and you will learn a lot about the pulmonary system. It is a great way for you to become a citizen scientist and a great way for you to challenge your mind. You're going to learn a lot about the pulmonary system, and I build you up. You don't need any knowledge about it, and each lecture builds you up. All right, and you will learn a lot. And this way you can be more discerning. So when you hear the news about something, you can have a medical background or a medical baseline of knowledge to discern the news. In addition, you'll be able to read these articles that are being published and have your own opinion on it. I don't want you to be listening to people on YouTube as much as you have been during the 2020 crisis or on Rumble. I don't want you to be listening too much to the mainstream news or the powers that be at the agencies in the US government or at the uber government level at the UN telling you on your health. I want you to make a discerned opinion about how to navigate for your own health. Reduce the power imbalance because they're taking advantage of you because you don't have a baseline on science, on medicine. So if you go and learn, you will get that knowledge. One great way to do it is to go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and purchase the module, the pulmonology module for $50, and you're going to get a lot of information about the pulmonary system. And that will be a good baseline for you to carry on to the next modules. And I'm going to be teaching you all these different systems of the human body. It's going to improve your health. It's going to improve your knowledge. It's going to be able to challenge your brain so you'll have better mental acuity. And not only that, it'll make you a citizen scientist that allows you to be more discerning because you were taken advantage of by the government because they knew you didn't know much. And not only that, it'll allow you to actually get out of this absolutism. See, in the truther world, it's all about absolutists. But in the real world, it's being able to understand the nuance of something. Not everything that, in terms of certain things are bad. Not everything in terms of certain things are good. And I want you to have that baseline of knowledge to be able to know where that middle ground is. And when you are at that point, then you will be able to be a better citizen, a more informed citizen, and reduce that power imbalance between you and your doctor. Because when you go in to be looked at with your doctor, the doctor knows that he knows more about medicine than you most of the time. All right. But when you can challenge him and see some of the fallacies of his training, his or her training, then you will be a better patient. You want to reduce that power imbalance. How do you do that? You think listening to Lisa Haven is going to give you that reduction in the power balance between the patient and the physician? Or listening to someone that is building you up in knowledge of all these different systems and how they work together and how to improve your life? Get informed and you'll be a better citizen. Or you can just listen to a bunch of people that are conspiracy theorists that sometimes are right and sometimes are wrong, but they're usually absolutists and don't know where the nuance is.
Which is a geopolitical analyst focused on Russia and China. He joins us here at the Munich Security Conference. Thanks for speaking to us, Dmitry. So Vladimir Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, has just been talking to the audience here. He's been trying to push back against the current mood of pessimism over the war, and he said that, you know, it's a myth that Russia cannot win this war. What's your view on that?
Well, I think you have to look at where we are. And I think a lot of people have this pessimistic view because they've seen what Russia can do in terms of wrapping up its industrial production and being able to, let's face it, outpace the West in producing artillery shells and other munitions. However, we have to appreciate that the Russians have burned through 40% of their reserves in doing so. They can't continue this forever. This is a war of attrition. And the war of attrition, the party that wins is the one that can outlast the other. The Russians can continue doing this for a few years. They can't do.
That boy doesn't seem to know much about history. The Russians have always focused on attrition, and they have won. And throughout the centuries, because of this battle of attrition, Napoleon, Hitler, I wouldn't count out the Russians when it comes to attrition strategy. By far, the Western powers are more susceptible to the problems of attrition, aka Vietnam, aka what happened in Afghanistan, aka what happened in Iraq.
Definitely. The West has more resources. The big question is, do we have the will?
Yeah, so let's dig into that. In terms of the will, Zelensky has just received security agreements from Germany, from France, and the UK. So these are kind of...
The Western world, in the aggregate, has more opportunity to be able to, quote, wage war. The problem is that we're spreading ourselves too thin in a three-front world war. We can't do it unless it goes unconventional. On top of it, you've got manufacturing because of people saying that we got to have more integrated, just-in-time supply chains that failed during the crisis in 2020 because there was no redundancy. The human body has redundancy. If some process isn't working, there's another one that may kick in. There's negative and positive feedback loops and redundant processes. If all of them fail, then you have a big problem with your body. But we have redundancies even in our biochemistry pathways. Having a social system that doesn't have redundancies is a very fragile system.
From Western countries to keep supporting Ukraine in the long term, but they're not like guarantees that they would actually kind of jump to their defense, to Ukraine's defense. So how meaningful are these agreements?
I think they're good for public relations, but let's face it, this is not NATO membership. This is not Article 5 guarantees. This is not the promise that Europe or the West more broadly will come to Ukraine's defense if they're invaded by Russia. And that's really the main issue for this war. Yes, Ukraine wants to take its lands back. That's really important, and obviously liberate its people. But the thing that it wants more than anything else is durable security to make sure that Russia cannot do it again to them. And that's what it needs to figure out how to accomplish.
Yeah, so let's get to that in a moment, but just kind of focusing on the degree of support, like currently and in the months ahead. Obviously, there are big questions about the US right now. So we have a package of support that's gone through the Senate, questions about whether that will go through the House of Representatives. What happens if that support really does collapse politically this year?
It'll get very ugly. We have seen just today, Ukraine withdrew from Avdiivka, the city that the Russians have been trying to take since 2014. And now they've taken it, unfortunately, today. You're going to see a lot more of this happening in the coming months if this aid package does not come. The reality is you cannot defend territory if you don't have artillery, if you don't have other munitions, and the Ukrainians are running out of everything right now.
I mean, Olaf Scholz, the German chancellor, sort of implicitly said that Ukraine would simply lose this war if American support fell off. Is that ultimately your view?
I think that's a very fair characterization. And look, you cannot defend if you don't have weapons. And this front is.
Let's ask the question, if the United States never engaged in this activity, would Ukraine even have gone this far? Probably not. So basically, everything that Ukraine has done is from US support, either it's money, it's weaponry, or it's special force activity. So it was really a proxy war. It was a proxy war. Ukraine was a proxy war that seemed to ramp up right after we got out of Afghanistan.
Collapse. A lot of people have been talking for the last 6 months, this war's in a stalemate. Well, it's not a stalemate. The Russians are on the offensive, and they can make gains if the Ukrainians don't have artillery, if they don't have armored vehicles, if they cannot stop this Russian advance.
So let's look through some more scenarios. Say US support does get through, at least in some degree. Later this year, of course, there's the US election. Donald Trump could potentially be in the White House. What's your expectations for how he would approach this? He said that he would find a solution to this war in 24 hours, which presumably means caving into Putin.
Well, I'm not going to predict what Donald Trump is going to do. I think that's impossible to know. However, I'll point out for people that have this doom attitude of the Trump presidency in regards to Ukraine, is that Donald Trump was actually the first one to provide weapons to Ukraine in 2018 with a Javelin missile. So who knows? It's impossible to predict. But the reality is that Ukraine is going to need support for years to come. This is not going to be a quick victory. The Russians can continue their offensives for at least the next couple of years. So we have to be thinking about this in the long term.
So yeah, and ultimately this is then, it's a combination of military stamina, but also the political stamina to back that up. It basically does come down to this kind of battle of the systems that people talk about, right? The Putin autocratic system versus the pluralistic democratic system of the West. Like, how do you rate their chances?
Well, you know, the thing we have to look at is not only is there, from our security perspective, is it important for the West to make sure that Putin does not defeat Ukraine, that he does not advance to the borders of Europe, even in more of a way that he is today. But also the money that is being spent is mostly being spent in Western countries. It is being spent on our industrial base. It is a jobs program. Vast majority of the money that is in this bill that the House of Representatives may be considering is going to American companies and American workers that are going to be producing those munitions that will ultimately go to Ukraine. It's not money that we're turning over to the Ukrainians. So it is good for our economy. It's good for our security because we're enlarging our production for potentially other conflicts like Taiwan and China that is on the horizon. So there's lots of reasons to do this, not just uniquely focused on Ukraine itself.
And yet it is becoming increasingly politically controversial, not just in the US, but also in many European countries where there's a pressure from the far right. You know, the kind of vulnerabilities of Western democracies are kind of out in the open. The vulnerabilities of the Putin system are more hidden, and they just kind of, you get a peek at them sometime. Like, what's your feeling about how strong Putin's position is right now? I mean, he's just killed his last really significant remaining political opponent.
Yeah, well, let's be honest, that President Putin has not had a competitive election in many years now. To the extent that he's had elections, he's had to rig them, not to win necessarily because he had the support to win it, but he wanted to show high popularity numbers, and he had to stuff the ballot boxes to some extent to help show that. But the reality is that Russia is incredibly weak. Even though its GDP grew last year, it was because of basically them engaging in military Keynesianism. That is not productive for their economy. And the reality is so much of their young people are at war and dying in that war. This is killing Russia in the long term.
Military industrial Keynesianism. Dude, are you paying attention to what's going on in the United States? Every time we have these bills that are passed in Congress, this money is being funded to the military industrial complex. That is military industrialized Keynesianism. So what he's blaming Russia for is what the United States is doing. Bullshit.
And figuratively, and we need to realize that we have all the advantages. We can outlast them if we have the will to do so.
So this really is, assuming that both sides can maintain that will. I mean, is there any end in sight? We're kind of 2 years into this, but if you add the period after, Crimea and the Donbass, maybe we're 12 years into this. I mean, 10 years rather. So, I mean, could this go on for another 10 years, do you think?
I don't think at this level of intensity, Russia cannot sustain this. They can, again, they spent 40% of their reserves last year. This is not sustainable for them. Could they do it for 2 years, maybe 3? Yes, but not much more than that. And that
China is most likely going to go into Taiwan in this year or next year. And it is very possible that the Middle East gets more intense, especially in the northern front. So you don't have 10 years, dude. See, they're thinking that this is an isolated incident. It's not. This is all coming to a head, these 3 regions. This is boiling up to a world war. Really think America can do a 3-front war? We can't even do a 1-front war properly because all of our generals have never won a war.
I think the problem that has been characterized by this inaction that we're seeing in the West is that no one has defined, and this is true of both Ukraine and the rest of the coalition, no one has defined what victory looks like. And the way that you win this war is by outlasting Russia. And if you can last for 2 to 3 years, providing support to Ukraine, their back will break, their economic break, the industrial back, and that is how you win.
So let's look at what a victory potentially could look like. I mean, everyone says ultimately this is going to end in negotiations. What is the kind of give and take that you think is kind of realistic? Of course, the Ukrainians say that they want all of their territory back and they want to get into NATO. Do you see that as realistic?
Well, we'll have to see. This year is a year of building. So assuming the aid comes, the Ukrainians are going to spend it, try and rebuild their offensive capacity to try it again. And we'll see how much territory they take. Ultimately, where the line is going to be drawn, whether it's going to be at the original 2014 borders or not, is going to depend on how much progress they can make in retaking it. But the main issue is actually not the land. The main issue that you're going to have is how does Ukraine get durable security guarantees? Obviously, it wants to get into NATO. It wants Article 5 protection. Russia is not going to want to give it to them. So it depends on how much pressure you can put on Russia that Russia is going to acquiesce to their accession to NATO.
So that's ultimately it. Russia has to be as much on the back foot as possible, right?
It has to be on the back foot, and it has to be on the back foot economically. This is actually, you don't win this battle just fighting on the battlefields in Ukraine. You have to break the backbone of the Russian economy, and you have to make sure that they go through their reserves. You have to keep the sanctions up on their industries, and particularly the price cap on their oil to make sure that they're not able to get significant revenues from their energy sets.
And ultimately, when it does come to some kind of negotiation, China is going to be involved. Yeah, I mean, China is obviously Russia's most important supporter. China is not likely to be very keen on the idea of NATO expanding to include Ukraine. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I don't think that China is going to want to be a big player because, frankly, we can shame them. The reality is that they can put a lot of pressure on Russia. They keep talking about the need for a ceasefire and the need to end this war. Well, they have a lot of leverage here with Russia, and they have applied none of it. The reality is they've refused mostly to meet with the Ukrainians. So they're big proponents of peace, but they don't want to talk to the party that is being one of the parties in this war. That is obviously the Greek party. That is absolutely hypocritical. We have not done enough to call them out on it.
So looking ahead to this year, obviously there are an awful lot of wildcards, an awful lot of uncertainties. Like, what is the one thing that you would say to our viewers that you're really watching out for this year that will be a real test of the years to come?
Well, that's an easy one, the aid package. You have to see that get through. If it doesn't, Ukraine is in great danger of a collapse across the entire front line. And people think that this is just about, well, how much territory can it take? No. If Ukraine does not get aid, you may see Russian troops again near Kiev and have potential to take Kiev, not in the coming months, but potentially by the end of the year. So that aid package is absolutely essential.
Dmitry Alperovich, thanks for your time.
Thank you so much.
They were given a chance to get something done in Ukraine. They failed, pull out. And first of all, we shouldn't have been poking the bear, even though Putin is a killer. See, remember what I was saying? You know, I want you to be a citizen scientist, to see the middle ground and not be an absolutist on one side of the argument or the other side of the argument, but see the validity potentially on both sides, and that there's maybe a middle ground. Well, here, the United States, with its posturing of encroachment of NATO towards Russia, that's a real historical fact. But Putin is a killer too. So, you know, there's corruption and, you know, and totalitarianism that's going on in Russia, right? So it's a little bit in the middle. Both players are at fault. But when it comes to contemporary Ukrainian problems, I would say a big part of it is due to the United States posturing and the movement of NATO towards Russia, and this need to grow it more, and the inability for our national security advisors to actually have a plan to integrate Russia more into Europe, more into the US economy. And by doing that, we would have a more peaceful existence with Russia. And let Putin just die out and let democracy flourish, instead of doing this Cold War mentality ever since the Berlin Wall fell. And you have to remember, Putin wasn't around in terms of as a major power broker, you know, on the international stage until 2000. So from 91 to 2000, the United States catastrophically mismanaged Russia. And we are now seeing the after effects of that. It doesn't mean that Putin's a good guy. It just means that the United States isn't a good guy either.
Since the beginning of the war in Ukraine, the country has been undergoing a period of intense soul-searching as it reevaluates its responsibilities in the area of defense. In a groundbreaking address to the Bundestag following Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Chancellor Olaf Scholz declared a watershed moment, marking a fundamental shift in how Germany sees its role in the world. To talk more about this, I'm joined now by Katharina Engberg, a defence analyst who previously served as Sweden's defence representative to NATO and the EU in Brussels. Katharina, you published a very interesting paper looking at how Germany is reevaluating its security role in the world. You talked with a range of government officials. What was the general message?
Well, I'm surprised by the quick change of worldview of Germany. I know there's been a fierce debate in Germany regarding the need to move swifter and many complaints about Germany not taking the necessary steps in order to respond to the new realities. But for me, having followed German defense and security policy over decades, I'm surprised at the new realization, the swiftness of change of mind that I find in Berlin. And this makes it very important for all of us, not only Germans, but for Swedes and other Europeans, to follow very closely how German defense policies will evolve over time, because it will be decisive for European security.
Yeah, you say you were surprised. What about the response of other European countries to this shift in German policy?
Well, there's been this continuous complaints about Germany not shaping up and not responding rapidly enough. But I think the political change was there fairly soon, and that was important. Then to put money and resources to the task, that's a different sort of task, and that will take time, not only for Germany, but also for my own country. Our defense sectors have been underinvested since the end of the Cold War, and will take long time to catch up and to build the capabilities that correspond to today's challenging security environment. And I think it's might be particularly difficult for Germany for a number of reasons, but one reason being that it's just shouldering a greater responsibility now for Europe's security, as was pointed out in its national security strategy, where it's very clearly states that the aim is to become a cornerstone of European Convention of Defense. So trying to fulfilling that task in terms of resource allocation will take years, if not a decade, for Germany.
Let's talk more about money then, because Germany is going to spend nearly 72 billion euros on defense this year. That is more than it ever has done before. It's also using a special 100 billion euro fund to meet the NATO target of spending 2% of GDP on defense. Where is this money going specifically?
There's a lot of capabilities that have to be built up. Ranging from ammunition to air defense, and Germany has made a lot of investments lately, just starting with the in terms of air capability, the purchase of the American.
Perhaps maybe NATO should be truncated, if not totally abolished, and the European Union should fund their own defense.
F-35 aircraft. Fighter aircraft, but it's also a question of personnel, and this is something that takes a long time for every country to build up the personnel needed for such an ambition to put 300,000 troops at the disposal of NATO's new forces, as Germany has done. You cannot command, well, you can if you change your policy to a conscript system, then you can command people to actually serve in the armed forces, but short of that, you have to compete in a labor market that is already tight in terms of access to young people who would want to become officers or just serve in the armed forces. So I think even though it's very costly to buy all these new systems that are needed for in terms of various defense capabilities, I would point to the personnel shortages as one of the most serious challenges to German defense ambitions. But I would also underline that this is not unique for Germany. We are experiencing something of the same in Sweden, although we have reintroduced
problems with the conflict in the world, not having enough bodies to be able to fill positions in the military. Oh, just call it Boston Robotics, and you can get your own super soldier with AI capability. We're moving towards the next war. If you look at each world war, all right, and even the Cold War, which is kind of a quasi-war, there was a new technology that emerged, all right? World War I was really the implementation of the Gatling gun that was actually invented during the Civil War. But this mechanized automatic weaponry, and then the emergence of planes, all right, and tanks, but then that, and then also chemical warfare, all right, trench warfare. Then World War II. Planes and tanks were improved. Their lethality on the battlefield and the reliability on the battle in the battle was much better. All right. And it was much more part of the battle plan in World War II. Then right near the tail end, of World War II was obviously the atomic age, right? And the whole Cold War was through this nuclear weapon, destroy your enemy, tactic that we had, and mad, right? And now that was the Cold War, right? And some people even say that the Cold War was World War III. But let's just say that it was just the Cold War, all right? And World War III is around the corner. You really think it's going to be implemented like World War II? Or do you think it's going to be more implemented through unconventional means and robotics and drones? We're already seeing that emerge on the battlefield in Ukraine and in the Middle East. You hear more about this drone stuff. So you're going to start seeing the emergence of the hellhounds and soldiers that are robotic, more drone use, swarm capability because of AI with drones. All this kind of stuff is going to start to emerge in, quote, World War III, because we don't have enough bodies. And then when that all happens and everything shakes out and there's a winner, how does that technology get implemented into the surviving society? Because every war, the technology somehow gets integrated into the society, even all the way to TV dinners. It's a big problem, big problem. Wake up. 1984. Surveillance, AI, Minority Report. We've been warned through literature, through movies, through sci-fi, and we didn't listen. And we're just letting it happen. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, because I need to do a commercial for PNN. I have these anti-aging boxes. So I have them curated in such a way at different price points to get someone to start following the anti-aging protocol to get healthy and boost up their immune system. I have two boxes. They're called the anti-Fauci beginners box and the anti-Fauci advanced box. And in the anti-Fauci beginners box, you get Max 35, which is a structural nano silver liquid. You take a teaspoon of it a day. If you're not feeling well, take a tablespoon or two a day. Ashwagandha root, which will bring down blood glucose levels. Turmeric, which will bring down inflammation and is an antioxidant. Magnesium and zinc, that will boost up your immune system. And vitamin D3, which will help with calcium, help with gene expression, and help get rid of infected cells by going through apoptosis. That is the beginner's box for $200. You get very high quality supplements to help boost up your immune system, bring down inflammation, and neutralize pathogens. In addition, for the advanced box, you can get either coconut C60 or avocado C60 2-ounce. This is a very strong antioxidant, and it will neutralize those free radicals, improve the cellular health, improve the mitochondrial health, and you'll get more ATP. When you start to neutralize these free radicals on a regular basis, what will happen is you're going to slow down the aging process, your mitochondria is going to get healthier, you're going to have more ATP, and your immune system is going to get better. So you get in the advanced box everything I just said in the beginner's box, plus the C60 that you get to pick either the avocado or the coconut, 2-ounce, for $260. Either one of those boxes are very high quality to get you to start realizing that there are synergistic aspects to these supplements that will help to improve your health. All right, so please go to the store and get the anti-Fauci beginners box or the anti-Fauci advanced box. either for $200 or for $260. And that will help to support my work, and it'll also help to support your health. Back to how the world is going to hell.
More limited form of conscript system, but still we have left the entire focus on professional armed forces that we opted for after the end of the Cold War. But getting the personnel to serve, that's a very difficult task.
Is it conceivable to you that Germany could reintroduce conscription?
Yes, and I think you are studying it. And from my friends' officers both in Berlin and here in Sweden, there are conversations going between German and Swedish defense officials, where the German defense officials are inquiring us about our experience of reintroducing.
You start asking families that are supporting these war initiatives, all right? Very few of those families are going to be willing to put their kids in the military, all right? They'll send someone else's kid, right? Now, we'll see. But you start forcing the population into a war agenda and serving through a draft, and you're not going to get the support. And therefore, it's going to lead towards these governments needing to buy these robots from Boston Robotics, or other companies. There are probably other companies out there that are competing, but Boston Robotics is the one that I've been focused on, in the news. And drone warfare.
I would say reintroduce it in a very limited amount of numbers, but still the principle of conscript, it's only about 8,000 that are being called out currently. And one of the limitations is where we just don't have officers to educate all these young people that we would want to recruit through an expanded conscript system. So I think Germany is looking at the Swedish experience of reintroducing the conscript system. I do not know what the conclusion will be, but I think this is an alternative that is being looked at least.
How do you think that would go down among the German public?
Well, Germans would be the judge of that. Difficult, of course. Difficult. However, in my country, there is, I think, a very clear realization of the fact that the security situation has changed profoundly in Europe. And there we are faced with existential issues. So there's a seriousness to be reckoned with. And that translates, of course, into more of a willingness to serve. But then there's always the competition for young people who may have better offers of doing different things, more interesting things, better paid things. And that's another limitation for armed forces, that you cannot compete with the private sector in terms of the salaries you offer to young people who sign up for not only for being a conscript for a limited time, but to serve more long term in the armed forces. So I guess that would apply to Germany as well. I don't know to what extent the pacifist mood that has marked so much of German consciousness since the end of the Second World War is still there with young people. I would guess there is some. So that there would be some reluctance that is related to your historical experiences that we do not share, of course.
Absolutely, and it also is weighing heavily on Germany's relationship with France, because the two countries don't exactly see eye to eye on a range of issues, including plans for a joint air defense system. What is the source of that disagreement?
Well, the source of that disagreement is that quite a substantial part of the new 100 billion euro fund that you mentioned has been dispersed on the purchase of these American 535 planes, which are very expensive. Now, many other countries in Europe are doing the same. They are buying the American planes because they feel that's a way of getting sort of an indirect security, reinforced security guarantees from the Americans. If they buy Americans, they can count more on American support. I think that applies in particular for the East Europeans, but I think there's an element of that too in the German decision. And of course, there's a judgment regarding the capability of these planes that have been important as well. But nevertheless, that has gobbled up quite a substantial chunk, and you have both Israeli air defense systems components and some French initiatives, European initiatives. And I think the argument, which of course has not been well received in Paris, I think the German argument has been that these systems are there now, and it will take time to develop, for example, a French or European alternatives, which are under the way with regard to some capabilities, but still under the development. And given the deteriorating security situation, Germany has given priority to the swift purchase off the shelf, as we say, from capabilities that are already there. And Israelis, as we know, have a lot of experience in terms of air defense.
I'm also wondering about how sustainable this spending is going to be. That €100 billion fund is due to run out in 2027, and that is what is enabling Germany to meet its 2% of GDP target for NATO. How do you see this turning out?
Well, that's true. I think the baseline defense spending for Germany is now 1.5, and you reach the 2% through the addition over the years until 27 through the special fund. Yeah, what will be the decision of the next generation of politicians or the next governments of Germany? I do not know. From reading the press, one is told that there are serious discussions going on in the government, with the German Bundestag regarding long-term funding, and that there is a consensus among the major parties regarding the necessity to secure the long-term funding. However, I do think that Germany may, in the end, have to look at this debt brake that is confining its expenditure, as you suffered a crisis from the activation of the debt brake in the fall. I just don't think that there will be enough resources in the government to cover what may not be only 2%, but even more, 3 or even 4% in terms of future defense spending, without sort of changing something in terms of governance over German financial resources. And I say this because I think not only is it, as many NATO countries made lots of pledges at the Vilnius summit last summer, but now when they're going to transform these pledges into realities, capabilities, investment, they find they are more expensive than they thought. So this in itself puts the financial strain on not only on Germany, but also other nations. Take Lithuania, where we're going to put a brigade. Now they have to cover most of the costs for building the infrastructure for the German brigade. Themselves, they get some from NATO, but it's also a question of national spending. And I think that's a realization now shaking in many capitals, that this is more expensive than one thought of. But I would like to add an element, and that is that we may, as Europeans, over the next decades, I'm afraid, live in an insecure situation with regard to Russia's policies. I wouldn't expect
World War III is coming in 5 years. Now we're not talking decades away. I'm telling you, the problems that are starting to ramp up in the Middle East and what's going to be happening in Asia is going to radically change the power dynamic since World War II. We don't have decades, honey.
War in Ukraine to end in a clear-cut peace agreement, but rather a frozen conflict. And in parallel, we would, as a European, have to take on a greater responsibility for Ukraine, primarily through the European Union, integrating functionally in various manners Ukraine into the European Union, even though it will take a long time. But that means that we, as Europeans, will have to shoulder a great responsibility for the security of Ukraine, but also to live with a border with Russia that stretches from the Baltic Sea to the Black Sea, which in part is composed of a frozen conflict. And even if we don't have a Trump as a president in Washington, in November, I think it's time for the Europeans to shoulder more of the responsibility for its own security. But if we are going to do that, it will take more than the 2% that the countries now have committed to.
Exactly. Exactly. They need to foot their own bill. And what they'll start to realize is they can't keep on passing these crazy socialist policies in their legislative branch for the EU, whatever they call it. Parliament, I guess. The council.
Let's look at the contribution of the private sector then. I want to show some pictures of a groundbreaking ceremony that recently took place at weapons maker Rheinmetall in Lower Saxony. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz was there, as was Defense Minister Boris Pistorius. Rheinmetall has been a big supplier of weapons to Ukraine. Its share price has tripled since Russia's invasion. European defense stocks in general are up too. As uncomfortable as it is to talk about economics in this context, to what extent do you think the defense industry could provide a boost to Germany's languishing economy?
Well, Russia certainly is living through a Keynesian war stimulus of its economy. I'm not sure it will be sustainable in the long run, but it's obvious that if you make major public investments, and I'm not talking about Russia now, but about European countries, that may boost growth. However, many of these new investments in necessary capabilities will probably require an element of public resources securing this investment, because the defense industry has not been used to producing for wartime conditions since the end of the Cold War. It has been built down, it has been closed, some of the industries have closed, and now as we re-energize the sector of our societies, and Sweden is also a country with a considerable defense industry, it takes time to big up the infrastructure to meet the demands, political demands, in terms, for example, the 1 million artillery shells that we have promised Ukraine to deliver. And the European Union particularly has realized that it has to provide a long-term security to the industry, that this is not just a one-off thing and then the Ukraine war ends and we will no more, we will make, the procurements will end. An industry will be asking, how do we know that this is not a one-off thing only, that we can actually invest in long-term capability? I mean, this is not investment over a year or 2 years, but over decades. So the European Union has come up with different proposals, and not only proposals, but also funds that sort of make an investment.
I think it's a perfect opportunity for the United States government to stop having to fund NATO and be able to just walk away and have the European Union take care of their situation. They should be defending their own territory, and the United States doesn't need to be involved. And the United States will be able to save some money. Well, we wouldn't be really saving. We would have to at least have more money to be able to pay the interest payment on all the debt that we have incurred over the many, many, many years.
In the procurement and in the build-up of this, in the build-up of the capabilities of the industries that produce ammunition, for example, there's a special fund from the European Union cannot, from its budget, fund the payment of the ammunition. That's why we have an off-budget fund for the peace facility that has been paying for the military resources that European countries have been given to the Ukraine. But in terms of ramping up production capability, you can use actually the budget of the European Union. So some money has been allocated from that in order to give relevant industry security to start to build up the capability to make to produce not only 1 million artillery shells this year, but over time. Because as we have been discussing previously, it's not only Ukraine that needs artillery shells, we need them for our own defense forces that have been underinvested and now to some extent depleted by the resources we have given to the Ukraine. Sweden has, for example, given some 20 billion in value, 20 billion Swedish crowns to in terms of defense material to Ukraine, which of course.
Just listen really carefully to these experts in international affairs, in war planning. We're running out of bullets to have more war. That's the big takeaway. I have to go to commercial because this is PNN. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the clarity factor. It will reduce the brain fog. It will get those neurons firing. It will help with the dendritic connections. I take this twice a day, in the morning and the mid-afternoon. Some people just take it once a day. It will help you focus at work, at school, and even if you're not working or you're not in school and you're just retired, this will help you to be able to concentrate better and to get those dendrites active. You don't want dendritic recession, because dendritic recession means less cognitive function, less acuity. So to maintain that acuity, to build it up, take the clarity factor, and better yet, it's synergistic with the C60. The reason being is by taking the C60 every day, a teaspoon of it or a full dropper, and you're taking the clarity factor, you're going to maintain and have better dendritic connections. The C60 gets rid of those free radicals that are building up. As we get older, we have free radicals that build up. It will help to maintain and improve the mitochondrial health, so you have more ATP, and this will help with that firing for the neurotransmitters, and so it's synergistic. So you'll be able to maintain and improve those dendritic connections. A big part of aging is this building up of toxins, building up of free radicals, too much inflammation, a weakening of the immune system, and dendritic recession. So if you follow what I've been saying about taking the supplements that I have on my store, you're going to be able to improve these things and be able to improve your mental acuity, bring down that free radical load, and improve and slow down that aging, and improve your immune system. And that way you're going to enjoy your life more because you are less prone to having problems. So go to my store and get the clarity factor so you have better mental acuity. Go to my store and get the vitamin C. It helps with the immune system. If you're not feeling well, take a double dose, but you should be taking this every day. You should be drinking 64 ounces of filtered water. And if you take my collagen that's on my store, and you take this vitamin C and you drink that 64 ounces of water, you're going to actually improve your dermal layer for your skin. So vitamin C helps with the skin for cross-linking if you're drinking filtered water and taking collagen, but it also helps with the immune system. And lastly, resveratrol. It's an antioxidant, but it also helps to get rid of senescent cells, and it's part of the anti-aging protocol. When you're getting rid of senescent cells at the basal layer, your adult stem cells will start to populate new cells, and your average length on your telomeres are going to actually, in that tissue, will actually be longer. Reason being, you're getting rid of the old cells and you're repopulating with newer cells from your adult stem cells. So go and get the resveratrol as part of the anti-aging protocol. Back to the news. This is PNN.
To substantial, particularly army resources that we now have to rebuild ourselves. So there is this need to build up defense industrial capability, not only for Ukraine, but for ourselves. But this is a long-term commitment, and industry will need public spending commitments of security of various sorts in order to to start production lines that will last for longer than a year or two.
Mm-hmm. And as you say, this all takes an awfully long time. German defense spending is up, but the country is still incredibly far behind globally. If you just look at the biggest weapons makers, they are all from the US. Germany's largest player, Rheinmetall, is way down the list. We are in an election year in the US, the likely Republican candidate.
Number one, defense companies, number one, Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, Northrop Grumman. You know, the United States is nothing but war. Yeah, war, football, and Doritos.
Earlier said, flippantly or not, who knows, that he would encourage Russia to, quote, do whatever the hell they want to any NATO member that doesn't reach defense spending targets. How much of a security threat does the second Trump presidency pose for Germany?
Well, it is a challenge to all of us Europeans, and I would guess in particular for Germany, who has built some of its post-Second World War security policy on the assumption that the US is not only the protector of Germany and Europeans, but also sort of the guarantor that Germany will pursue a post-war policy, defense policy. That sort of double security connection with the US is very important for Germany. So I think this is maybe more dramatic for Germany than for many other countries, because Germany, being the largest country in terms of defense spending and the fourth of EU GNP and so on, will now have to step forward. Without the protection and the coaching, not only the protection, but the coaching provided for by the Americans. And I think we should make this as a matter only of Trump or Biden. I think we should look at the long-term trends by which, as we know, both administrations would prioritize Asia. Now, Americans wanted to get out of the Middle East and now out of Europe, and now they are back in both. So they cannot pivot only to Asia. But still, China is the ultimate challenge for the Americans, which means that we have to step up as Europeans to fill not an immediate void, not a weakening of a dramatic weakening of security guarantees by the Biden administration, in particular if Biden is re-elected. But still, there's this long-term trend that we cannot expect the Americans to carry this burden to the same extent that they have done. If Trump comes into power, then of course we do not know what a second Trump administration would mean in terms of defense policy. In spite of all the rhetoric of the first Trump administration, military reinforcements were made in Europe, the henceforward presence in the Baltic states, etc. So one has to distinguish between rhetoric and real policies, if I say so. But still, there is a very strong isolationist trend in the Republican Party, and which is reflected in Trump, but is wider than the issue of Trump. One argument that is being made in the American debate is not only that the Mexican border is a more important issue, but rather that we need the money for ourselves, and we need to make investments in our own country. So this sort of isolationist policy could be more radical for a second Trump administration than in the first, which would mean that we could actually see a weakening of American commitment to European security. Still uncertain, but as Europeans...
Americans should stop paying for Europe. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and improve your oral hygiene by getting my toothpaste. It is a structural nano-silver toothpaste. It does not have any fluoride in it. It is the best toothpaste that you're going to be able to get. It whitens your teeth, freshens your breath, reduces that gum inflammation. It neutralizes pathogens. And by having good oral hygiene, high quality oral hygiene will reduce cardiovascular disease. So please go to the store, get a few of these tubes of this toothpaste, and you will be improving your oral health better than anything else on the market. Way better than anything that Alex Jones has. all right? Way better than Armor Hammer, way better than Crest, way better than AIM, way better than any of the toothpaste that you've used before. Go to the store and get a few tubes of this. It's the-studio-reykjavik.com. Link is in the description, and get the toothpaste. I also offer structural nano silver gel. This is a great product to put it on your hands. It stays active for 5 hours. It neutralizes pathogens. You can put it around your mouth, around your nose, lightly coat your nostrils, around your eyes, around your ears, and neutralize pathogens. If you put it on a cut, it'll help heal the cut. If you put it on an abrasion, it'll help heal the abrasion. If you put it on a minor burn, it'll help to heal the minor burn. Put it on acne, it'll help to heal the acne. And if you put this on your skin before you go to bed and exfoliate in the morning, every day, you're going to start to see an improvement on your skin health. So it's a skincare product on top of it. I believe in providing high quality products that have dual purpose. So go to my store and get the structural nano silver gel. Back to the news.
Should plan for this for this sort of development not only because we expect it to come through, but also because it's sound for the Europeans to assume responsibility for more responsibility for its security, while trying, of course, to preserve the transatlantic relationship. But I do think in the long run, it will be the Europeans that will have a responsibility to show responsibility not only for Ukrainian economy and reconstruction, but also for peace and for the protection of Ukraine.
Given all this uncertainty and the fragility of the transatlantic relationship, there is a debate taking place in Germany right now about the need to develop a nuclear deterrent in the EU. Did you ever think you would see this debate taking place?
I'm not surprised. Well, I'm surprised that German politicians saw a few. I guess it's only one. I think for the time being, spelling out this so clearly, because of the signal, the importance of the signal it's giving. But I think that it is important in terms of future security to remind ourselves that we have two nuclear capable European countries, which is the UK and France. The difference between the UK and France is that France produces its own nuclear capabilities from fissile material to the rockets and the platforms, while the British rely on American fissile material. So I think this is something that we have to discuss more, and the French have on and off sort of hinted at the possibility of sharing discussions on nuclear dockering with European partners and so on. And I think this issue will now re-emerge. How do we assess the importance of European nuclear capability in view of the potential weakening of an American security commitment? I think this doesn't need, again, to be an either or, but I think it's just a maturing sort of a maturing of European responsibility. And then we cannot circumvent, in particular, I'd say, the French nuclear capability. And I would then expect that the French offers to share doctrine and some other elements of the nuclear policies with partners that could have a more positive response in Berlin. Now, Germany itself producing nuclear weapons is, of course, a different matter altogether.
You see that happening?
Yes.
I find it difficult at this point.
Katarina Engberg, it's been wonderful to talk to you. Thank you so much for being with us.
Well, thank you.
So we covered a little bit of Ukraine and Russia and what's going on with Germany and their perspective. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the great products that I offer. And I have this new product line that's out. It's teaching you different systems of the body. The first module is dealing with the pulmonary system. And for $50, you get 22 lectures with video, with PDF files that you can download that will teach you how the pulmonary system works and different types of diseases, how to read x-rays, how certain diseases are treated, the physiology, the pathology, the embryology, the anatomy. So you learn a lot for $50. You get 22 lectures. There are 11 lectures that have been uploaded so far. And each day, each business day, I put a new lecture up. After everything is uploaded, then you're going to have access to another module that will also be for $50. And each of these systems that I'll be teaching you, neurology, the pulmonary system, cardiology, infectious diseases, lots of different systems, renal, there's going to be about 20 different modules that will be offered. It takes some time to make. It's a lot of work on my end, but it'll allow you to become more discerning, have more knowledge to reduce that power density, that power gradient between your physician and yourself, right? The patient and the physician power differential is too great. And by you becoming more informed on how your body works, you're going to be able to ask questions and be more discerning as a patient. And not only that, you'll be more discerning when you are listening to mainstream media, and more discerning when you see research articles being published. I want you to become a discerning citizen, a citizen scientist. The problem is that the scientific baseline in the United States and the world in general was low when we went through the crisis. Now, there are people that tried to ramp up and learn more, but it would have been better if their baseline was strong before the crisis. So it's important to become an informed citizen. That includes in the sciences, not just in international affairs. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the $50 pulmonary module that I have up, and go through those lectures, read through those PowerPoints, and you're going to learn a lot about pulmonology. Thank you for listening, and have a nice day. And make sure you subscribe to all my channels. I have 3 channels on YouTube: Bitchute, Brighteon, and Rumble. Thank you for listening, and have a nice day.